Order at 6:29. We have a roll call for the commissioners, please.
Commissioner Emmett,
Present.
Commissioner Biggins,
Present.
Commissioner Lindner,
Present.
Vice Chair Gubard,
Here.
Chair Gibson,
Present. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, we're out for public comment. I've got a couple of public comment cards here. I'm not going to read this out because everybody here knows what the thing is. Okay. We've got to receive something from Ellen Taylor, couldn't be here today. And Michael, you want to read this to her,
I
or?
thought that we'd wait till the agenda item.
Okay,
That's
we
okay.
could do that. Okay, then next would be Drake Meinke.
Wait until the agenda item.
Okay, but that was the bandstand. Oh, the ordinance? Okay, I'll make note of that. And that was the bandstand. No, both were ordinance. Okay. Okay. Noted. Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay. All right, moving on to item number 4, approval of the minutes. Is there a staff lead on this? Do you want me to just run through this? We looked at these minutes at the last meeting and there were some minor changes, and so we're bringing them forward now for our approval of the March 7th, April 18th, and then for the first time, our last meeting, June 6th. Would I entertain a motion to approve the minutes so we can start our discussion? Can I have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Gubard. Need a second?
A second.
Second by Emmett. Okay, is there any discussion on the minutes for March 7th? Hearing none. Okay, April 18th, which was the workshop. Okay, I noticed the typo on the second page, the last paragraph. I'm sorry I didn't see it before, but I think it says members seem to support the HPO, but it's SEAMAD and it's probably. Okay, anyways, noted. Doesn't change the meaning of the thing. Okay, now let's move on. Hearing no more minutes. Okay, June 6th. I noted that actually there's 20 people present, but they did filter in towards the end, so as opposed to 12. Other than that, I don't have anything else for those minutes. Does anybody else have anything to discuss on those minutes? Okay. Hearing that, all those in favor of approving the minutes for all 3 of these meetings? You want to do a roll call?
You guys.
Your voice? Okay, give me a roll call then. This is for all 3 meetings. Did you give me a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Emmett,
Approve.
Commissioner Biggins,
Approved.
Commissioner Lindner,
Approved.
Commissioner Gubard,
Approved.
Chair Gibson.
Approved. Okay, thank you all. Let us move on to item 5, discussion items only. First thing up is Town Code 7-17-8-2, the Historic Preservation Commission. Ruth Mayday is going to lead off of this discussion. And I would like to apologize to you, Ruth, for last meeting. Emotions are running high, I think, all around, and I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of that.
Thank you. All right. There we go. Safe. Click please. Okay, so the first item is Chair, excuse me, Chair Gibson mentioned is a discussion of Town Code 17-8-2, which outlines the powers and duties of the Historic Preservation Commission. Next, please. So this is the creation, section 17-1-1 that talks about the creation of the boards and commissions. And this is overall what should be for all boards and commissions, that the council is empowered with the ability to create those, and that any board, committee, commission created by the council shall be responsible to the council and shall function in advisory capacity to the council unless otherwise provided by state law, town ordinance, or resolution. Next. So I want to talk a minute about the difference between ordinance versus charter, because there was some discussion of following the charter. So in municipal terms, a charter is something specific that we have charter cities, and they are managed in a completely different manner than a council manager form of government. So an ordinance is what governs the activities of a board or commission that's set forth in town code. A charter is an instrument that establishes a body, politic, or other organization. So this is an ordinance that governs the activities of this board and not a charter, because there is a charter city and that charter governs how that specific city is managed. There can be different, most of them are pretty similar, but there can be differences from charter city to charter city and how they're organized and who reports to whom and things like that. So I want to make sure that we're talking about the right thing here. Okay, next. So section 17.81, this is the creation language. This also sets forth the purpose, the identification, evaluation, protection, preservation, and enhancement of historic properties that have significance for the town of Clarkdale. Second, powers and duties. The commission shall make recommendations to the town council and have the authority to implement recommendations adopted by the town council. So a town council can make recommendations that for the Historic Preservation Commission to undertake certain activities. And those are also things, whether or not they're in the ordinance, that you can do. So the, whoops, that's all right. So this section lists a long list, almost 26 of the, because we almost ran out of alphabet, of responsibilities for the commission. So initially create for the approval by town council and maintain and update every 5 years or as directed by town council, a plan for historic preservation of historic properties within the town of Clarkdale. So we have a draft strategic plan, but we don't really have an historic, what would constitute an historic preservation plan. Maintain review criteria and guidelines contained in the historic preservation plan to assure fair and impartial evaluation and designation of historic properties and historic districts. The commission shall periodically review these criteria and make such adjustments or updates as may be required with the approval of town council. So these guidelines have been incorporated into the historic preservation ordinance and can be made of part of a historic preservation plan. Amendments to that ordinance would follow amendments to any other ordinance in the zoning code. There would be hearings at there'd be a hearing at a planning commission is where this is initiated. There's a public hearing there. It would go to town council for final review and approval. Maintain criteria to assure a fair and impartial review of applications for certificates of appropriateness. Such criteria shall be subject to review and recommendation by the design review board, planning commission, and ratification by town council. We have not had any requests for certificates of appropriateness, but that process is outlined also in the historic preservation ordinance. Review properties proposed for designation as historic properties, explain to the owners thereof of the potential effects of such designation is known to the commission at that time, and make recommendations to designate, conditionally designate, or deny designation based on criteria and facts as stated. Again, we don't have anybody that's asked to be designated, but we do have those criteria set forth in the ordinance and a process. Review property nominations for designation as a historic district. Explain to the property owners of all such properties therein the potential effects of designation. Make recommendations to planning commission and town council regarding any proposed rezoning within a historic district. So essentially, if there was a reason to expand the existing historic district, this section E speaks to how that process would work. So it would come to Historic Preservation Commission. You would make a recommendation to the Planning Commission and Town Council, because those are the two boards that are responsible for the public hearings and for making those changes to adopted maps and plans. Review and approve, conditionally approve or deny of applications for certificate of appropriateness. Again, we have those standards in the historic preservation ordinance, and we have not received any requests for review to date. Maintain and periodically review and update the local historic resources inventory and consider the inclusion of any properties which may have come to meet the requirements and the deletion of properties which may no longer exist or no longer meet criteria for inclusion. We haven't really started that yet. There have been some properties that have been modified so they would no longer meet the requirements for being included in the district. And there have been some where people have painstakingly restored them back to what they originally looked like and should be considered for relisting. Conduct detailed studies and surveys of properties and areas and assess their potential for designation as historic properties or historic districts. We haven't started this yet. Again, I think that the existing historic preservation district pretty much captures most of the structures in town. So if there is a situation where somebody does own a historic preservation that's not already included in the district, we can take a look at that and consider whether or not it should be designated or added to the district. Determine and cause to be created a system of markers for designated properties. This task is underway. Commission reviewed and approved the design presented by Drake Meinke of the Arizona Copper Arts Museum. The faded signboards for the historic markers have been replaced, and preliminary research to update information is underway. Funding will be sought through the Arizona Office of Tourism or other sources. AOT has a really nice grant for that sort of project because it ties history and tourism together, and it gets people out on the streets and walking. Recognize the owner of designated properties, issued commendations or other forms of recognition to owners of historical properties who have rehabilitated their property in an exemplary manner. Again, if somebody has done a great job in rehabbing their building, their home, some other historic structure, the commission is certainly able to present them with a commendation of some sort. We can certainly do something to recognize those efforts.
Has the smelter been recognized by the town for its?
No. So that would be a good one to start with. Make recommendations to town council regarding the acquisition of property suitable for preservation. Such acquisition may include the purchase or acceptance of donated property. We haven't really had any offers of donated property. So we have not done this yet. We haven't really had an opportunity to make any recommendations to council because we haven't talked about acquiring any historic properties. Make recommendations to town council regarding the use of federal, state, town, or private funds to promote historic preservation. The following recommendations have been made with respect to grant applications. The HPC supported the application of the Arizona Copper Arts Museum for heritage funds in October of 2021. It also supported Drake's application for historic signage, sidewalk, cafe, furniture, fixtures and equipment, and museum display inside the market building in 22. And we did discuss an offer of support with the Questers for signage. Make recommendations to town council to accept gifts, grants, funds, contributions, and bequests. We haven't had any of those offered, so we haven't made any recommendations. Cooperate with and enlist the assistance of persons, organizations, foundations, and public agencies in matters involving historic preservation, renovation, rehabilitation, and reuse, subject to town council approval. So individual commissioners may have had these contacts, but they were not approved by town council. Staff continues to work with SHPO on historic preservation projects. That's probably the agency with respect to historic preservation we work with the most for obvious reasons. Increase public awareness of the values of historical, cultural, archaeological, and architectural preservation by developing and participating in public education. So is it the 5th Monday or the 5th Friday, the presentations by the Clarkdale Historical Society Museum?
Well, first Fridays.
First Friday. All right, first Friday. That's a really good example of things that the Historic Preservation Commission can either undertake or support in furthering publication about public education about historic preservation. Annually prepare reports, written reports of commission activities, submit such reports to town council and the State Historic Preservation Office. These reports shall be available for public review. Staff has provided reports to the town council. We've had a couple of joint meetings. We have not really sent annual reports to SHPO, but we talk with them frequently enough that they're aware of what's going on. Work with and assist departments of the town in matters affecting historic preservation. Commission can recommend to staff and council that action be taken to prevent the demolition by neglect of designated historic structures. Offers of assistance have included historic markers and funding. So we have had, the commission has taken some actions to assist town departments with historic preservation. Assist property owners upon request by providing advice, recommendation, or direction on matters regarding the restoration, rehabilitation, alteration, landscaping, or maintenance of any historic property. Staff has not received any requests about this, but this is a very important role that the Historic Preservation Commission can provide. You have access to a lot more information than the town does. Many of you have deep experience and expertise in some of these areas that would be very valuable for members of the community when they go to rehab a property or want to have questions about landscaping or how to maintain a historic property. And that is one of the biggest impacts that the commission can have on historic preservation in town. Encourage and assist property owners of historic properties on the procedures for inclusion in state historic listings and National Register of Historic Places. At the request of property owners, the commission may provide recommendations for appropriate state and federal agencies in support of applications for historic designation on specific properties. We haven't had any of these requests yet, but again, this is where the Historic Preservation Commission can reach out to people that they know that have restored homes that they have seen that have been restored, may not be on the National Register right now as part of the historic district, but certainly could be added. Carry out such other duties as may be determined by the town council and present other such recommendations as may be deemed pertinent. So council really hasn't identified any additional tasks. There's plenty of work that we have here just in this section to take on. We have forwarded many of the recommendations that the Historic Preservation Commission has made to council. I think that's it. So I want to talk a little bit about how some of these relationships work. So Stephen did a very detailed and thorough legal opinion that's part of your packet. You should have also received it via email about the role of HPC relative to council, and that it's an advisory board to town council. So as an advisory board, town council can either accept your recommendations, listen to what you have to say, or not pay any attention to them at all and do their own thing. That's just the nature of the relationship. That's what they can do. The role of the Historic Preservation Commission, despite that, is still to review these things and still make recommendations for the council, and essentially doing the legwork and helping them make that decision. It's completely within council's, like I said, to accept, reject, and make changes to anything that the Historic Preservation moves forward. It's the same thing for the Planning Commission. They can send a draft ordinance to town council with recommendations for language. Council can edit it and change it, or they can pass it the way it is, or they can send it back for more work. Okay, next. HPC and staff. Staff's role is to research topics and present information to the HPC, advise the commission, and make recommendations regarding the information we receive and other things, decision points for the Historic Preservation Commission. We meet all the time with contractors, with consultants, with SHPO, with other state agencies that might have input on a project. And that's what we do. And 99.99% of the time, we don't include elected officials or board members in those conversations. Simply because it needs to be dealt with on a staff level, because that's the form of government that we have. And a council member, in a council manager form of government, that's how this distribution of work is carried out. So HPC, consultants and agencies. Communication between staff, the commission, consultants and agencies should really be directed to staff for us to carry through and make sure that it gets to the right agency. We retain, because the staff assigns a contract, which is a legal document, with those contractors and with the consultants. And when we do that, especially when we're talking about contracts with architects, engineers, and other design professionals, we have scope of work statements, and they frequently bill on time and materials. So the more time we spend talking to them, the more time they bill us for. So we need to keep that at a minimum while getting the information that we need. It's also not advisable for you to call state agencies or federal agencies about some of these projects.
Will you please let the staff speak? Thank you. You could speak during the public comment period if you want to speak. Okay. Thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so the reason we advise against it is because it's confusing to those folks when they get one version of what's going on from us and another one from the public. We have ongoing conversations with this agency about details that as commissioners, you may or may not be aware of. And it delays not only the project we're talking about, but then staff has to dedicate more time to answering responses, and it takes time away from other projects that we're also working on. Elected and appointed officials play a very important role in municipal government. But everybody plays a role, and we have to stay within those roles. Otherwise, we don't have any organization. We don't have any way of getting anything done. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about this. Stephen's here to answer any questions you may have about this section or the memo.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Ruth? Or would you like any questions directed towards the state staff attorney?
Attorney.
Commissioner Gabbard?
Direct my question this way, whoever wants to answer it.
Well, first I want to say, Stephen took the profession. He called me before the meeting and asked if it's okay if he was here. So I wanted to know, I appreciated his professional courtesy in that, because he could have just dropped in and not said anything. And so thank you, Stephen. So go ahead.
So thanks for the presentation. It's helpful. I think to go back to one of the comments that was made in the June meeting, I think some of the frustration regarding the gazebo, and I don't mean to, I'm just using that as an example. I think many of us felt like we didn't have the information we needed to make recommendations. So I think one of the comments I made, and I think what I heard from some of the other commissioners is that the process by which we're getting information is not working for us. We don't feel like we have what we need. So using like the SHPO as an example, is there a way for us to work around that? Could we invite the SHPO to give a presentation in a public meeting about discussions that were had with the town staff? It feels to me like to have the town staff report out on what might be a long and involved discussion with the SHPO in a short meeting is not the best, it's not the most effective or efficient way to convey that information. It would be easier to hear that directly from the SHPO or to ask questions of the SHPO directly. Is that something that we could work into in the future to avoid missing out on information or avoid miscommunications?
So with respect to that specific case, there was information that we did not discover until the last minute. Had we discovered it earlier, you would have had it earlier.
Okay.
So it's not that we're withholding information and just piecemealing it
No,
out.
no, I'm sorry, I'm not suggesting that.
No. What I'm saying is that we present you with all the information we have when we have it. And so for that specific project, SHPO doesn't have any jurisdiction because there's no state or federal funding involved and there's no Section 106 review, which would be the vehicle by which they would review the project. Despite that, staff has gone to them on numerous occasions and had conversations about this and relayed that information to the Historic Preservation Commission. We had SHPO take a look at it. They're fine with this. So we do relay those back. But I think this goes to what we're reporting, the detail of the discussion we're having with SHPO and the role of the commission. So if there's information that you're not getting that you want, we need to be more specific about that. I don't have a problem bringing SHPO here for specific things, but it's a long drive and it's a big ask of their time to come up here and explain things.
Okay, I mean, even in the case of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Even in the case of voluntary consultation with the SHPO, if you synthesize a 1 hour discussion into a 5-minute synopsis, there's a lot that's missed out in terms of details. I think what we want is details about the discussion. Sure. It would be helpful to hear that from the SHPO. If there's not a way to do that effectively.
Well, with respect to that, we simply report back whatever documentation we get from SHPO that says we've looked at these things, here are our findings. That's what you get. That's the report that you will get to look at.
Okay.
And review. That's not.
I didn't see anything in the packet about that.
We're not done yet.
Okay.
That's why, I mean, this is an ongoing project. Okay. So we don't have the volunteer review done yet. Or consultation, I'm sorry.
And Commissioner Gobard and Chairman Gibson, if I may.
Please.
Stephen Polk, Clarkdale Town Attorney. Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic question in terms of, you as the commission, if you're asking for information to help you make those decisions, my advice and recommendation would be first, you direct it back to Assistant Town Attorney Ruth Mayday. She is your liaison for the Historic Preservation Commission. And you ask her, hey, I think to make this decision that's going to be on the upcoming agenda, we need this information. And then she can, through there, either say, great, we can either get this to you in written form, or maybe there is a way to get SHPO to come out, if it's applicable. And I can't speak to the specifics of the gazebo, but certainly I think we should be trying to get you the information you need to be educated on the topics. And so direct that to the assistant town manager here, and then hopefully we can get you what you need.
I have no problem with that. I mean, if you read through a staff report and you still have questions, let me know. Because I'm happy to get the information, whatever is missing, whatever you don't understand, I'm more than happy to get that information to you so that you can make a decision. I don't want you making a decision on 50% information. Nobody likes that. But I just need to know what it is specifically that you're looking for. Like we'll talk later on about when we talk about the bandstand, but there are those reports I have no problem sharing. They're public record, so I can't keep them secret.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lindner.
Yeah, I just had a comment about the bullet on HPC and staff and interaction. This makes it sound like our only role is to receive information and process it, when in fact, we actually have information and knowledge that maybe the staff may not have, and SHPO may not have. So I'm still struggling with why this is not more participative in these dialogues. Thought that was the whole reason that we were seated here, was because we had individual knowledge and strengths and background in historic preservation. And
Construction, planning, architecture, history, and archaeology.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd love to speak to that. And you make an excellent point, and thank you all for your service. Thank you, your volunteer commissioner serving on the Historic Preservation Commission. And the council made this commission because historic preservation is important to our community, it's important to our council. So you're serving an important role for us. You're created by ordinance by the commission to serve in this advisory capacity. And so really it's how can we best leverage your expertise and qualifications, which are really excellent in historic preservation, for the benefit of the council, who ultimately makes the decisions for the community. And so that's really through council and staff, it's how can they best utilize your talents? And if that's an advisory capacity, that's what we're asking you to do. And then really staff they're the boots on the ground doing the work for the whole town. And then if and when it's appropriate for, where staff wants to bring you in and do more boots on the ground work, then that's really, they'll reach out to you. They can extend that and ask you to do that. But really sitting here today, it's advisory capacity is really what we're asking you to do.
Chairman, Commissioner Biggins. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name in previous meeting.
I'm looking a little bit more forward to the certificate of appropriateness. When I know when that comes to that process, HPC gets involved, makes a recommendation. So my concern is we have the historic preservation specialist, which really hasn't been defined. So that role is going to be critical in at least putting our advice of what we think it should be and what the town is trying to do, and sort of have an independent process, because you got to have somebody from the town making the decision. They could just reject it. So if you're like this, the specialist, you just said you have the authority to just reject any recommendations. So I'm wondering how we're going to work through that process.
So the historic preservation specialist would not have that ability. That's town council.
Okay.
Council is the one that can say, we don't like this ordinance, we're gonna rewrite it, right? We don't agree with your findings, we're gonna do this. That's what town council can do. Staff, if somebody presents me with an application, I have no choice but to accept it and process it and provide due diligence and provide them their day. They get their say. It's a constitutional matter. I can't say, I don't like you, I don't like.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If we're advising, we could just use the bandstand as an example. If we're advising, and we're saying we don't agree with the steps you're taking because you're not preserving it. If you're the specialist, it says right here, you can reject or ignore any of our recommendations. That's what it's saying. So there's a lot of power on one side, unless I'm missing something.
That's not my read of it at all. Which part are you?
Well, you're saying right here, it says clearly defines HPC as an advisory. Council may accept this recommendations, reject it, or ignore it.
Right,
All right, so if we have a process where someone's coming through
right.
and needs a certificate of appropriateness, you come to us, we recommend certain recommendations.
Right.
You don't accept them.
No, it's not that we don't accept them. If you make recommendations, I take those recommendations, whether I like them or not, whether I agree with them or not, and they go to
Okay.
town council.
Then what's the purpose of the historic preservation specialist?
They review projects that come into the town. So for instance, if
Okay,
somebody has,
so then they're the ones that's supposed to forward the process to us for review.
so first they
Okay,
do their certificate, the certificate of no effect. And if that doesn't work, then they go to the certificate of appropriateness.
Which
That
involves
goes
us.
to You
Right.
guys.
Then we
Right,
just provide the advice and then the
Right, you
council
look
can
at
take
it.
it or do whatever they want. Okay, it seems to be that there's a little bit of power, maybe more on the town side of the specialist piece that could be, I don't know, abused.
And
or,
then
or overlooking the HPC.
Commissioner Gibbons, I think just to help orient us here, are we speaking on the historic preservation ordinance right now? This is a
Right.
discussion on that. So that is an agenda item that'll come up later. But I think let's come back to that. It would be my recommendation when we're on that agenda to speak to what a historic preservation specialist is within the meaning of that ordinance.
All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Linden.
Yeah. I acknowledge we'll probably agree to disagree on this, but, Stephen, when you, responded to my last comments, it kind of sounded like our role is to basically fulfill a process that's convenient for the staff and the council. And that the council and staff are responsible for the town. Well, I think from my perspective is the ultimate project itself is the town project. And if anybody, us either being a commissioner or a resident or a non-resident, if we see something that is not perhaps correct, accurate, or going to lead to the best outcome for the town or the project, again, I don't understand why those individuals are not allowed to participate. It's not about making it easy for staff and council. It's about getting the project done correctly in accordance with the standards of historic preservation. So again, we have information and knowledge and facts that others may not have. Not their fault. Weren't born and raised here. They don't maybe have the same resources that we have in terms of research or the contacts. So in order to get the best outcome, I would think that these meetings would be very open and participative, not that we having decisions to make. We aren't the decision-making authority, but we should be allowed to attend and contribute and point out things that are incorrect. And I think that's what we did at the last meeting and so forth. So
I don't think there's any restriction on that in this. In fact, there's quite a bit in this list of items I've read that are forward-looking and that do involve the participation of members outside of town staff. One of the things was consulting with people about rehabilitation projects and providing them expertise. And that's something that members of the Historic Preservation Commission can do that. There's nothing that says that you cannot, if I am Jane Doe that buys a house on Main Street and I want to do some work on it, and I call the town, I say, you know what, you should contact either the museum, here's a list of, or Historic Preservation Commission members. We have some people with specific knowledge about those things that you should talk to. When people come into the town and ask us, I bought an old house, do you have plans for it? I don't have plans for it, but call the museum because they do. We share that information with people all the time, to make sure that the people who have that knowledge are sharing it with the people who want it.
Hey, I'm going to follow up on that because I'm looking at, there's 20, A through T, it's 20 items that we are responsible for or whatever. And so 7 of those have not been initiated
Right.
out of the 20, and 3 of them are basically, we can't do because we don't have an ordinance yet. So half of our missive basically is sitting on the shelf still at this point, 3.5 years into the commission. So I'm looking, that's kind of a glaring number, half. And so and listening to my fellow commissioners, I'm starting to, I made myself a note about good faith doctrine in Arizona law. And I'm kind of feeling, was the commission impaneled in good faith or not? Or are we just a paper commission?
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of what you're hearing here is some of the, because of the way that we didn't make a recommendation to the town council about the bandstand. I didn't stand up in front of the council and say, here's my recommendation for the bandstand. That never happened. And so we're kind of got left at the altar that we're kind of feeling is what I'm hearing from the commissioners who are speaking.
And I can see how you would feel that way. But it's the role of staff to take that recommendation to the town council, which is what we've done. That's what we took to them during one of the meetings. We had a whole list of documents that we provided to them, the engineering report, the Historic Preservation Commission recommendations. So they got all of that information. That's the role. Staff does that and not commissioners.
Okay, I'm reading Stephen's missive on June 16th, item 2, second paragraph. Additionally, the town council is not obliged to maintain ongoing dialogue with the Historic Preservation Commission once a recommendation has been made. And that was, we didn't make one.
Your minutes
Bandstand.
with the minutes went to town council, the reports went to town council.
That's not a voted on recommendation, though.
That's your recommendation. It is not
Okay.
again, with all due
Alright.
respect, it is
Alright.
not the role of commissioners to make presentations to town council on town policy. That's staff's role.
Okay. Well, we can see why we're having problems, I guess. Okay,
And then this is Stephen Polk, town attorney again.
Thank
know,
you.
for-
Yep.
First,
recognize.
yeah, I would say, we're all on the same team here. I think that's a great point to make. And we're all trying to do what's best for the town. And ultimately it's the council that makes those decisions. And so whether it was on the gazebo in particular, whether there was just the discussion in Historic Preservation Commission, and that was taken back by the assistant town manager to council versus whether there was a formal vote by the commission. I think we could say this was a learning opportunity for all of us, really. And one is better communication, more communication would really go a long way. So I'd say it's been a learning opportunity. And, Mr. Chairman, I think your apology at the beginning of the meeting about when things get heated, I think that is much appreciated and mutually felt in terms of, right, the gazebo has been, it's important to all of us, right? That's the heart of our community. And so, thank you for your participation. And what we're here talking about is, how to do this governance with, mutual respect for the benefit of the town. And so I think we've made a lot of good progress though, and a lot of good communication.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any more questions for the commission, from the commission to staff? Okay,
Maybe one more.
okay, Commissioner
So,
Givard.
there were a lot of things on this list
Right.
for us in terms of responsibilities. My understanding, and I could be getting this wrong, I didn't review this before I thought to ask the question. To become a CLG, which my understanding is that is still the path that the town is on, correct? We need an ordinance, we need a commission, and we need a historic preservation specialist.
We don't have to have a historic preservation specialist. That's just the staff. That's the name that we use for the person on staff that would review that.
Okay, so we're on our way to doing that.
Mhm.
In terms of a historic preservation plan, we should be moving in the direction of creating that as well.
Correct.
What is the role of the commission in initiating that plan? How do we do that? If that was a priority for us to
Correct.
start next after the
Right.
ordinance is completed, what do we do? to
Thank
start
you.
that?
Thank you for that. So with respect to the historic preservation plan, that I would like to wait until we get the ordinance finalized and then move forward with that plan. And that is a plan where, because I am not an expert in the history of Clarkdale, I rely on those of you on this commission that are. So that's where we start. Which structures are most significant? Which structures do we need to pay the most attention to? Which areas need attention and some encouragement in rehab? How much, which houses or which building, well, I shouldn't say houses, which buildings do we need to take a more active role in getting them back into a usable condition and functioning again? So that would be the role of the Historic Preservation Commission in that sense, is to bring forth that knowledge that you have about the history of the town and the uses of these buildings throughout time. And how do we best preserve those? Which ones are a priority? And rank those projects, because there's a number of them that we should be looking at. There's no doubt that there are a number of those that we should be looking at to make sure that they are preserved. And that's one of the roles of the preservation plan, is to set forth that list and the processes for doing some of these things. So that's where the commission can come forward with suggestions. Seen this over here, I've seen this done there, this worked really well. This is the history of this building, this is the history of that building, this is why this one was built. That's the information that you have that staff doesn't.
Would it, maybe you don't know the answer to this, would it be the intent of the town to issue a contract to do the writing and the research for that, or would it be the role of the commission to do the work to put that draft together?
At this, well, let's see where we are when we get the ordinance done. We're trying to get in Public Works Director, and as soon as we get that person on board, I can once again turn all of my focus to community development activities. So we're working diligently to get that done, and I'm hoping to have that resolved sooner rather than later. Right now, it's just a matter of bandwidth.
Understood, thank you.
So the bandwidth, is that budget or people? Or
People.
both? Okay, so we have budget, we just don't
It's
have
both,
people.
really. I mean, we have a little budget.
I know, I know. Well, this is my question. It's like, do we need more people? Is this something, can the commission lobby for more budget? Is that something we're allowed to do?
It's a little late. for
I know
year,
this year, yeah.
But we do have I have some money for consultants that we can probably dip into if we need to. If that's the route that the commission would like to take, we can certainly do that. We did that with historic preservation ordinance, knowing that we would not have time to manage that project.
Commissioner Lindner.
Yeah, I had a question. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we haven't started, and one of them is the historic resources inventory.
Mhm.
I mean, the one that we've got is from the late 1980s.
Right.
My question is, could this commission,
Mhm.
through its own initiative, go out and start tackling that, or do we have to wait till, you
No,
know,
you
the
can do
staff
it.
directs us to go and take on some of these items?
Take that inventory and hit the streets by all means.
And in so doing, though, what issues do we have in terms of participation amongst ourselves in doing something like this? Is there any issues with open meeting law when we're working on a project like that?
So 3 or more is a quorum. If you're going to go out and all 5 of you want to go, if 4 of you want to go, let us know that you're going to be out on the streets between, you know, August 1st and August 30th, doing this inventory, and we can post a notice of possible quorum. But that says basically there may be a quorum of, you know, historic preservation commissioners on on any of these days, but no business will be conducted. And that way, we've notified everyone that, yes, we know there's 4 of you out on the streets together, and no, you're not conducting any business. That would be a violation of O&O.
Yeah, and this is Stephen again. I really like that suggestion from the assistant town manager, you know, with one caveat. You know, you as a commission, you're required to follow open meeting law. And so any 3 of you is a quorum of that. And so if 3 of you get together on the streets together to walk around doing the business of the commission, that's an open meeting. So that's not, we can't post a notice of no business because you're actually doing the business of the commission. So I'll tell you, this is a challenge with open meeting law, but also there's a very good reason for that. And that is the business of our government is supposed to be open to the public. It's supposed to be visible and transparent. And this is the best way we know how to do it. And so if for something like putting together a, you know, list of historic properties and doing the walkabout around town to do it, my recommendation would be first, in a publicly agendized and notice meeting, on a proper agenda item, pick 2 of you to go do that and walk it together. Because that's not a quorum. Pick 2 of you to go and walk it and come back with recommendations.
We did a subcommittee of the with Drake for the street signs or on the historic building. So,
Perfect.
and we created a subcommittee of Drake and I, and we did that. So
And I think
we have precedent for that. So.
we did a subcommittee for the historic inventory, did we not? I thought that was,
I might have designated leads
What did you say?
for
We did
that.
what?
We designated some leads for it, I think.
Gotcha,
We
okay.
made a short list of committees at one meeting, that's probably about a year ago now.
Yeah, that's a while back.
Yeah. So, and I would hope too that not just properties, but also things like windows and doors and stuff like that, that people can use to do restoration with too. The library of stuff. I know I was up at Athol Bremner's property today. If any of you know that property, it's the original stagecoach for Jerome, 1870 something.
Which one is this?
It's the bottom of the hill at Jerome. It's the Clark's original stagecoach stop.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
He's peeling the walls back. They're finding some very interesting things. So anyways, he's, you know, there's houses, I know people had stuff in their garages, you know, old windows and doors. I found, you know, people ask me what to do with it. And so hopefully that stuff will go on the historic inventory as well. And we can have those available to people who actually want to do historic preservation.
Right.
Okay. Commissioners, can we move on to the next item? Oh, Commissioner Emmett.
You have to back up a little bit. So what I'm hearing is the Historic Preservation Commission will be able to participate more so after that ordinance is adopted.
Right.
And then there'll be perhaps more give and take and seeking information from us.
Right, because there will be, once we get the ordinance out of the way, then we can really start tackling this list of things that all of us want to get done. Believe me, having this list hanging out there makes me crazy. So yes, those are items that the Historic Preservation Commission absolutely can go out and start working on.
And if you have a question, just call and ask.
Right, just call me and ask me.
And then, you know, if we could be notified of that too, just.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments on this item? Okay. We'll move on to B, Broadway Phase 2 improvements. Another discussion only item regarding the roadway improvements that they're in the middle of there on Broadway. Is that you again?
That's me again.
Okay, here we go.
It's all me except for one.
Okay.
Everybody's gotta do her magic and get the PowerPoint back. Whoa, back. Broadway Phase 2 improvements updates. Okay, now next. So we've spent a lot of time researching whether or not Broadway is a historic road. And this is to the point where I think Tom has spent probably 80 hours making phone calls, talking to different people about what's going on, what the history is. So the when staff was working with the Planning Commission on the Broadway corridor specific area plan, this is one of the topics that came up. So we went back and we went through those minutes in great detail. We looked at all the reports, all the versions of the reports to make sure that we weren't missing anything. So essentially what we found is that at that time, staff verified that that portion of Broadway does not have any designations. And that the portion of 89A through Jerome to Cottonwood is part of the ADOC historic road system. And that we can apply for a scenic road designation along with a historic road designation, or we can submit those separately if we so choose. Now, like with anything else, we'd have to go to town council for approval before we submit anything. Okay, next. There was also quite a well-done corridor management plan in 2006. Even though it's old, there's still things that we could probably glom onto from it. But essentially, the corridor management plan is to manage this corridor from over Mingus all the way out to Sedona. And actually, I think that was part of Flagstaff. so that there's some unified signage and there's a sense that this is all one project, all one thing. But the corridor management plan, again, only applies to ADOT properties. The land, the Broadway was dedicated to the town, ADOT quitclaimed it to the town in the 70s, I believe in 77. And so they don't have any jurisdiction over regulating the land uses in that corridor. It's now the town's property. Next. So we went back to check all of the planning commission meeting minutes, all the town council meeting minutes to make sure that this didn't get slipped anywhere, and we didn't find anything. We've also talked with the ADOT North Central District administrator, I think his name is Brandon, at least what, 2 or 3 times about this topic when we were working on the Tawaki project. And they told us at that time that it didn't apply either. So we've left no stone unturned to make sure that we did a thorough job of researching this. So the short answer after all of that is no, Broadway is not a historic road. Next. So this, starting at the red circle over here and running all the way up to just outside of Flagstaff, what is currently designated as A89A is now the historic Prescott to Flagstaff Highway. So when you go on the website and you look for the historic Prescott Highway or historic 89A, this is the map that you get. This is what ADOT is talking about. Next. So I want to talk a bit about the topography here, because as I'm sure all of you are aware, there are pockets of it where it is super steep. So up in the upper left, you can see that it looks like the hull of a ship. That's the Miller Hill coming down and Broadway. That's the Moose Lodge. And we do have some really steep fall off along that section right before Park Road. Next. The same thing from Park Road to Tuzagoot. You do get a little bit of flattening, but not a ton, and it is dropped down. Those heavy lines are 10 feet apart. And the skinny lines are 2 feet, so we've got some pretty steep, deep terrain out there. Next. This is Tuzagoot to Peace Garden Path, so you can see there's actually 3 kind of flat spots there. So the first one at the top is where Tuzagoot is going. The second one is currently vacant, and then the third one is the campground. So those flat areas are few and far between for development. Next. Peace Garden Path to Bent River Road, that super skinny area obviously is where those cliffs are, where it's cut right straight through the rock.
Are those going to have to be widened?
No.
Okay.
They worked some magic and squeezed it all in. Next. And then this is just the section from the town boundary, from Bent River to the town boundary. Again, you can see really steep fall off. On the right hand of the smaller right hand map is the area where we saw a lot of erosion issues last year that we had to deal with so that the whole thing didn't slide into the river. Next. So this is the actual project limits. It starts right before Tuzagoot Road and then goes all the way down to the town limits. We have talked with, and by we I mean Joni, has talked with Cottonwood about the plans that we have and the design we have so they can continue it on their side. Next. So you can tell pretty obviously here where phase 1 ends, and that's where phase 2 is going to start. Next. So this is a typical cross section. If you slice the road this way, this is what you would see. So starting from left to right, we have a 5-foot sidewalk, and then some little drainage feature there. It's just curb and gutter. The 5-foot bike lane, the travel lanes are 11 feet wide each, and then another bike lane on the other side, and then again that curb and gutter to contain the drainage. So that's the only thing that changes from section to section is the slope of the road in a few spots. So this is that section again I was talking about where we had all of the erosion. We've proposed, the engineer actually has proposed some block walls, concrete masonry unit walls, and some railings. If we're going to encourage walking and biking, the last thing we want is somebody to fall into that ditch because it's deep. Next, so this is how the money lines out. We have $95,000 the town is paying for design. We're pretty close to finalized plans on that. The construction will be the HERF exchange funds at $664,788. And then we're responsible for a portion of that match at $225,000. So the total project cost will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $984,788 to get this section built out. Any questions?
Commissioner Linder.
Matt, go first.
Oh,
Just,
Commissioner Goodbar.
just,
Sorry.
to clarify, so, the historic, status was assessed and found not to meet the criteria or not assessed?
Assessed by
Presumably ADOT?
ADOT, yes.
So it was,
They said, no, it is not historic.
okay, understood, thank you.
Commissioner Linder.
Yeah, I had a question, about that same topic. What impact to the project would there be if ADOT answered differently and said that it was? Would it make any difference in terms of what we're doing?
Well,
Their jurisdiction any longer.
they don't
Right.
have, they haven't had jurisdiction since 77.
Right. So it's
Right.
really up to the town
Right.
to
I mean, I couldn't
pursue-
speculate what ADOT would say or do.
There's a historic marker right down here near the on Genie Park that talks about the history of that road. It started out being State Route 79, became a US Route 89A and a State Route 89A, and in the mid-70s, ADOT did abandon it. It was, or I should say 70s. It wasn't until the 70s that they renamed the bypass 89A. The bypass came into being in the mid-60s, which is not what was reflected in our packet. But I guess my question, though, in terms of the scenic, we did talk about the scenic roadway. Coming into Jerome, right past the Verde Central Mine up there, right-hand side, you can see it's kind of faded out, sign that says Scenic Road 89A. Jerome Clarkdale Sedona, Jerome Clarkdale Conduit, something like that.
I see it every day.
You see that every day. Right? There used to be, and I'm not sure, I don't think it's there now, it was there a few years ago, an identical sign right adjacent to the Safeway Plaza going into Cottonwood, where it breaks off, onto Main Street. Those signs came into being sometime in the 80s, my recollection. So based on the fact that there's a sign on either end, I would have thought that that entire stretch was labeled as a scenic road, whether or not ADOT owned the right of way or not. It has that same view shed, same narrow roadway that, was lost, for example, when Sedona went to 4 lanes. They used to have the same thing. Used to have it all the way up the canyon, all the way to Flagstaff, and more of that is disappearing. So, again, my question just is that, I believe that it is historic, but I think what we're being told is that it's just not based on the ADOT standards, or the ADOT doesn't have any cognizance over that road to label it historic.
Jurisdictional,
Jurisdiction.
right? So that'd be up to the town. So it's my understanding, we could put this on a future agenda item to,
Put this on a future agenda item
To-
for additional discussion. The caveat being is we are under tight
Yes.
deadlines with this. So while we can have that conversation, this project is going to move forward.
oh, yeah, well, it's not gonna impact it, I don't think.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a health and safety and welfare issue. It has to be taken care of. So, okay, that? Can we move on, Commissioner?
Yeah, we can move on.
Commissioner Biggins, did you have anything? Okay, Commissioner Emmett. Okay, all right. Okay, once again,
Condemned structures.
Bruce Mayday, Communities Development Director.
I'll do that. I'm sorry. This is right off the kiosk down at the bottom of the hill. Says, in the early 1990s, Route 89A from Cottonwood through Clarkdale and onto Jerome was assessed for its historical attributes and found to have not changed over the decades. It was then determined that the road met historic route criteria and was accepted as a historic route in 1993. So,
That's 89, that's the existing 89A.
uh,
That's,
the,
that,
the existing 89A wasn't built until 1965. You're talking about the bypass road.
the bypass is what they consider the historic 89A.
Ah,
Can we go back to that map?
oh my.
I think there's an error there.
That is the map I took from the ADOT website.
Okay, it goes through
Showing
Clarkdale.
80, historic 89, what they consider the Prescott to Flagstaff Highway, the historic 89A.
Yeah,
That's the only thing from the map.
I can't either. It goes through Clarkdale. I don't.
So you're saying Broadway is part of 89A?
On there. Isn't that Broadway?
I thought the same thing when I read it originally, which is why we've gone through all of this work to reach out to ADOT, to have detailed conversations with them about exactly what they mean when they say, this is historic, this is not. This is the map of the historic roadway.
Well, and it's the
That's
photo
the
that's on the
bypass.
kiosk, and again, you know, the kiosks were put together by members of the town at one point. It shows the stretch of what we now call Clarkdale Parkway as being that route, so
Well,
I
it
don't
sounds
think
like,
we're gonna solve this
no,
tonight, but
it
I
sounds
think-
like we need to do more research.
I
So,
think, yeah. I think
Okay.
this we dug into.
okay, all right, well, let's move on to the condemned structures. Ruth Mayday, Community Development Director, got a
Back
different
up.
hat on.
Condemned structures, thank God we don't have anything like this. So town staff went back through, its records for the last 3 years and permits that have been issued. We have not, there have been no condemnations. We have not condemned any buildings in the town. We have not. Condemnation is a process. It's not something we just run out and condemn someone's building. It's a long legal process. We have to have a good public purpose for doing it, building roads, things like that. So it's not something that we do frequently. So we have not condemned any structures.
Are there any questions for?
Yeah, I have a question.
Commissioner
I guess a clarification. My purpose in asking the question to have this reviewed was a property owner in Patio Park told me that the town had nailed notices on some structures down there. And that subsequent to that, they were taken down and new structures are being erected. And my interest in that was that those structures are on the Historic Resource Survey. And we would have an interest in terms of documenting if they're no longer standing and when. So maybe I used the wrong terminology, but maybe we should be looking at demolition permits. Which structures within the historic district is identified in the 1987-88 Historic Resources Survey have disappeared over the last few years. So we can go and document that, and then while information is still available from things like the Google Street Views and things like that, try to capture images of what was once there.
Right.
So,
And I appreciate that. I think that's an excellent idea. The property owner that you're talking about, we did not condemn those structures. Those were strictly code enforcement because they do not comply with property maintenance code. And there are several other issues with those. We've been working with that property owner for a long time to try to get those buildings at least enclosed so that they're not open to the elements. But yes, definitely, if that were to come to pass, we would let you know, because it is important to document that. It's something that we would make the Historic Preservation Commission aware of, because like I said, this is a process. We have court hearings we have to go through. There are notices we have to provide, public postings that we have to do. And then, even if it's an emergency situation, we can move the person out of the structure if they're living in there, right? But that doesn't mean we can immediately knock it down. So if that were to come to pass, if someone were living there, we'd say, you know what, these are not safe for residential use. You have to get out, post the structure is not occupiable. And then let you know that this is the likely direction this is going to take. If you want to talk to the property owner about getting stuff, you know, or if you want to go on and take pictures of it and document the property, I don't think that would be a problem. Now, with respect to demolition permits, I didn't take a look at those. However, a good example of what we talk about when we talk about demolition permits is the newsstand. So we issued demolition permits for the newsstand. They didn't knock the whole building down, they just gutted it. And that requires a demolition permit. So if you want a list of properties that we've issued demolition permits for, we can do that.
Yeah, and the home or homes that were taken down for this new structure, that required a demolition permit.
I'm sorry?
So there's a new structure, it's probably getting close to being finished down in Patio Park. Very large. From up here, it looks like it's one of the old actual patio structures. But when you drive down there, you can see, no, it's on the last street. It's a very large house that's being built.
Mhm.
So my question is, the structures that were there before, the small concrete structures, did they have demolition permits issued to take those down?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what we would like to see.
Gotcha.
And some of them will be applicable like those, and then the one for the newsstand isn't really a demo that for this purpose.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ruth on this topic?
Just Commissioner Biggins, on the demo permit, is there any distinction between a total tear down and just gutting, or is it? So so there would be some designation on the paper, so we would know which one is
Right.
which.
So
Okay,
when they come in, they tell us what they're gonna demo. Are you taking the whole thing down? Are you just ripping out the electrical and the plumbing? Are you just hanging new drywall? So yeah, we
Okay.
know that they're not going to bulldoze the structure.
All right, moving on to Bitter Creek Bridge.
Bitter Creek Bridge. Is it historic? Yes. Yes, it is. This, the Bitter Creek Bridge, as all of you know, is listed on its own on the National Register and is part of the Historic District. To me, it was a fascinating read of the listing. This is the earliest example of a reinforced concrete slab bridge in Arizona. It is also relevant because of the architectural treatment of the approaches. They're usually not that ornamental. Also significant because its association with Verde Copper Company. And it's one of the few privately constructed roadway spans in Arizona. So it landed on the register in 1988. So it's been there for quite some time. Next. So I wanted to talk a bit about what's going on with that area right now. So you can see Broadway. Charity, can you point to the bridge on Broadway?
Right there.
Right there. So you can see that in that area, we have some floodplain and some floodway issues. This is not going to be a fast project because we have lots of hoops to jump through. Anytime you do work in a floodway or a floodplain, you have to get a 404 permit through the Army Corps, and those are not fast. There's a lot of research and study that goes into those before they're issued. So really, the design phase, which is the phase we're going to be starting here, is going to be looking at a very large area as to where the replacement bridge is going to go. The existing historic bridge will remain in place and be converted to bike ped use. All right, next. So again, topo, because that's important. You can see where the town office is. Right there. This is where we are. And you can see the steepness of that hill going down. We kind of have limited areas for where this bridge can go. But again, that's part of what the engineers will be looking at is where that best location is. Next. So the funding, the town received $807,500 in a SMART grant through ADOT that pays for all of the pre-development activity, all of the design. The 6.3 million we received in a, legislative appropriation. We've gone through all of that paperwork. And so the total that we have right now is $7,107,500. Because that pre-development was included in the appropriation, ADOT may or may not take that back. They haven't decided yet. So for now, we're going to come next. So this is a little bit of detail about the SMART grant. When we applied for the RAISE grant, which is the federal program for the bipartisan infrastructure law, there are a lot of steps that small rural communities can't compete with the larger cities. I don't have an engineering staff. I can pull 3 engineers off and have them design all of this stuff for us. So ADOT set aside some funding so that we could get these things done. Took it so we can take a look at any amendments or changes that need to be made to any planning documents. Environmental research and risk assessments through EPA, ADEQ, NEPA. Feasibility, is it even possible to build this thing? And if it is, where is it going to go? What's the design going to look like? What's the engineering? How is it going to be engineered? Next. So this is a draft timeline of how long this is going to take. The funds were awarded on May 23rd. Council accepted and approved the award documents in June 23rd. We expect the pre-construction phase, so all of that research and all of the design to be done in 12 to 18 months. So during that pre-construction phase is when we'll probably figure out where the new bridge is going to be located and how that will impact the existing historic bridge. Because we're using state funds, 99.99999, in fact, I'd bet on it, we're doing a section 106 review on this. There's no doubt in my mind, because we will be using funds from that project to do some repairs and rehab to that bridge. There's some falling concrete that needs to be corrected. We need to hunt down the globes so that we can replace the broken globes. And just some general repair, holes in the concrete, things like that that need to be done to make the bridge safe and historically accurate.
Are there future funding sources? Because that doesn't sound like it's going to be enough money.
I thought the same thing, but we had that estimate came from an engineer.
Okay.
So we're hoping we can get it done for that. Next phase would be construction bidding and mobilization that I expect to take at least 3 to 9 months, if not longer. And then construction 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Depending upon how they build it.
Right.
Long way out.
Okay. I'm looking at inflation. I think you're going to be down about 20%.
But it's possible.
Okay.
All right.
Any
next.
questions? Oh, okay. We're still going. Okay.
I think that's
Go
it.
ahead.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, all right.
That's it. Any questions?
On the bridge
No.
specifically.
Good.
Okay. Looks like we're good on that one. Ruth.
All right. Historic preservation.
Okay,
ordinance.
moving on to the next item. Okay. How do you want to run this particular item?
Do we have John on the,
Have time to bring John on? Okay.
Yep.
Are you there, John?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Thank
I'm
you.
going to share my screen and pull up a brief PowerPoint.
Thank you for dealing with us to this point.
Of course. Great to be working with the town on the historic preservation ordinance. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we've got a PowerPoint going.
Yeah,
Go.
yeah, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, commission members. John Froke, I'm your historic preservation consultant, been working with you and town staff since about December. We've had a lot of public input over the last 6-7 months, and I'll go over a little bit of the history on, I know you have other agenda items tonight, and we've already gone through a lot of your the prior agenda topics for tonight, so I'll try to be brief but thorough. So we're back at you tonight, presenting the draft historic preservation ordinance. A little bit of background. So we've had a initial introduction of the project with you. I was with you virtually at your January 3rd meeting right after the new year. We had a stakeholder open house meeting where we're meeting tonight. The afternoon of February 7th, we received a lot of input. I thought that was one of the best open houses I've ever been at in my career. We had a lot of good input. We had elected and appointed officials joining us that afternoon, and then we took a little bit of a break, and then we segued into your meeting later that evening, also on February 7th. We got input that night, and with direction, yeah, go ahead. This sounds like something that we should be doing. Let's have you create a, meaning me, my firm, a historic preservation ordinance. So we worked on that in February and early March. And then at your March 7th meeting, we presented a draft historic preservation ordinance. We got a lot of input, again, from the Historic Preservation Commission. Over the next 5 weeks, there's a lot of interaction between myself, Ruth, and Tom, offline, if you will, to get ready for your April 18th meeting. On that evening, we had a joint special meeting of Town Council, Historic Preservation Commission, the Planning Commission, and the Design Review Board. And again, we presented an updated draft and received additional review and input. And subsequent to the April 18th meeting, we revised the draft Historic Preservation Ordinance, or HPO, accordingly. I would like to point out, I really think this is a community-based plan, community-based ordinance, I should say, based on the input that we've received from HPC, our elected officials with mayor and town council, various property owners and stakeholders that I've met across the last 6 months in our downtown area, and then just learning more about the background of Clarkdale. Continuing on with work summary, we took a little bit of a break. We didn't have a May meeting. We came back about a month ago. Made a few additional revisions to the draft. I have the date wrong here on the next bullet point. I apologize for that. At your June 16th meeting, we did have 2 stakeholders that voiced their support for the historic preservation ordinance. That was a long meeting. I think the meeting was adjourned at 9:39 or something like that. So for all of us, it was a long night. So I apologize for the typo there on that should have been June 6th. So here we are tonight, July 18th. This will be our 7th public meeting regarding the draft. The HPO, and I'm going to switch from PowerPoint into a Word document and just go over some high level kind of pre-final edits that we've made. And I'll do that in just a moment. So we'd like to think that we've taken all the input that we received that we thought was really appropriate for inclusion in the draft ordinance before it's adopted by the town later in subsequent meetings. There was a few minor edits that we've made in the last 4 weeks. At your last meeting, there was a request that we specifically remove the word demolition from, I don't want to get really into the weeds, but I thought this was important to highlight it on the PowerPoint, section 3-170.020. And then as we were kind of got a fresh look at the draft, we noticed some formatting issues. We fixed some margins, fixed some spacing issues. We dropped this map in. This is a map that we got from Tom on Monday. So this would be the rough area of the historic preservation ordinance, a historic preservation district. I would like to clarify or restate that, and I should have done this at some of the earlier meetings, where there was a concern, like if you look into, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the residential neighborhoods west, east, and northeast of downtown, the draft ordinance does not include any residential properties. And like I said at one of your prior meetings, I should have made that clear. I believe at your March meeting, when the initial input we were getting, like in February and March from the community is, well, hey, is this going to affect my livelihood of being able to live in my home? And the answer to that is no, it would not affect somebody's home. You've seen this slide before. We used this at your at the June meeting. We did some I thought it was pretty clever, some dot voting on some of this was the nuts and bolts of the draft ordinance. I won't go through all of these items, but we had at your April meeting, we had red and green dots where participants could basically weigh in, if you will, on certain topics that have led up to creating the draft. And so I just wanted to drop this slide in from the prior PowerPoints that you've seen from me. I'll go to questions and comments in just a moment. I'm going to switch out of this and just touch quickly. Most of the commission has seen this. This is your section 1-050. This highlights the zoning districts. We went through this at some of the early meetings. We're basically adding a 12th item under zoning districts where we've got historic district. This would be new. So that's something that we had covered at your earlier meetings. It's pretty straightforward since there's no reference to a historic district. And then under section 2, this is the definitions section. I know the commissioner had a question on your prior agenda topic on the historic preservation specialist. I'll speak to that in a moment. We just in looking as a newcomer to your town code, we were suggesting that we list this text here. It would be new under the definitions of actually listing who the building official is. And again, we covered this at some of your earlier meetings. It's basically the building official. That'd be somebody responsible for a staff person responsible for building permits, managing the building safety department. So there's no reference of a building official in the town zoning ordinance now.
John, excuse me, were you meaning to show us the ordinance? Because we're still on your PowerPoint.
I'm sorry. Thank you for.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, now we got you.
Okay, sorry about that. So this is, let me go back. So this is section 2-010. This is from the town zoning code under definitions. There is no reference to a building official, so we are suggesting as your historic preservation consultant, we do planning and zoning work as well, that the town code, zoning code should have a reference to the building official. So that's this section. And then there's two other, we don't make reference to the community development director anywhere in the code. So this is just, it's more of a housekeeping thing of highlighting or defining what the community development director is. This would, again, it would be a staff person, it would be appointed by the town manager, and the community development director would oversee the community development department. And then finally, we started, there's two other edits or additions to the this section. We started calling this early on, like at the January-February meeting, of a historic preservation officer, and that was causing some consternation and maybe some heightened concern that there would be somebody on staff, running around the town issuing citations to people. So we changed the title to historic preservation specialist. And again, this would be a staff person, probably a town planner like Tom, that in addition to being the town planner would also have the function of being the historic preservation specialist. This would be a person appointed by the community development director that oversees the Historic Preservation Commission and the activities of the Clarkdale Historic Preservation Program. And then, since we're creating a historic district or a historic preservation overlay, we thought that we should define what a historic district is. And so this text here under historic district is new as well. Again, this was crafted and reviewed by the HPC, I believe, at your March meeting. So the only real change on this page was moving from a historic preservation officer to a historic preservation specialist. The meat and potatoes, if you will, of the ordinance itself. Can you see section 3-170?
We got it.
Okay, great, thank you. This is the current draft as of this meeting tonight. We made a few edits from the June meeting, so this would be section 3-170, historic district, or HD. So really the only changes, we noticed a little bit of a margin, kind of a formatting issue. So that's why the red line is there. This is in track changes. So there was really nothing substantive here. I think we capitalized design guidelines just to be consistent throughout the ordinance. Same thing, we fixed some formatting just so that the alignments were correct. That's where the red line comes in, or the track changes. The staff had highlighted full scope under item number 3. And then item number 5 under the effect of a historic district designation would be that the HPC, meaning you, would serve as a design review board for historic properties in the district. And then we added the map that I showed just a moment ago. We changed some formatting in here a little bit on just some spacing. We deleted the word demolition in this section here. We did a little bit of a cleanup on the margins and the formatting under certificate of appropriateness. We added some clarification. The highlighted text came from staff. Once approved, the certificate of appropriateness serves as design review approval. Again, items 1 through 3, there was a spacing and a margin error. We cleaned that up. Under, I think, I don't want to confuse the Historic Preservation Commission, but at your meeting back in March, there was a lot of, this was just a little too wordy on the section regarding certificate of hardship. So we took the financials out. And so if you accepted the track changes in the Word document, these items, the real estate taxes, appraisals, property listing on like the real estate MLS, all that would go away. So that's just showing the commission kind of where we were and where we've been. So we were down into the weeds on this back in the winter and the early spring on just some of the items that might be needed from the property owner. And so we struck that. And the rest of the ordinance at your April meeting, we wanted to add some visuals under the design guidelines. So Tom was gracious enough to send us some photos that we could drop into the ordinance itself. I think at your February or March meeting, the commission said, landscaping really isn't historic. So we took out reference to landscaping. These are some visuals on just trying to describe like a zero setback. We have a section on exterior wall design materials and finishes. So again, on the right side of the page here, we're trying to show examples of what a building frieze or a dental trim might look like. Rather than just have text, we thought it was important to show a graphic of what, in the real world, what these items look like. Same thing with parapet walls. This is usually used for visual interest in the screen. If there's mechanical equipment on the roof, this would help screen that from public view. Buried roof line. These are all examples of what we have on our main street. So these are examples that we've been using, have been used really for decades in the town. Again, same thing with some information relative to window detailing, clear story windows, transom windows. Arches are prevalent in Clarkdale. These are examples of what we have right now on Main Street. On the left, here's another example of Clarkdale High School where the arches are being used. Awnings. I know at some of the earlier meetings, there was a discussion on awnings. Those are encouraged. This is just an example of an existing awning on Main Street. Here's the map again that I showed in the PowerPoint. We've dropped that into the ordinance. And then eventually once the HPC Planning Commission and Town Council, just from a procedural standpoint, the date would be updated. The last update to the zoning code was back in June 2021. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we've been and where we are today. This is the draft that's on your agenda for really discussion this afternoon. And I'll stop sharing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have tonight.
Commissioners, any questions of?
The comment, Commissioner Biggins,
Commissioner Biggins recognized?
Yeah, I just would say I apologize for misunderstanding the roles and responsibilities between the staff and the town council when I made my comment. So now that I understand what that is, I think it's clear that what the process is. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gabbard.
I still have some comments about the demolition and moving of building and structure section. I can send those to you if you'd like, or
Yes, please give.
Any other questions this evening of our commissioner or consultants?
Questions, or do you want comments on?
Questions, comments? Yeah, we could dig into it a little bit if you want to, sure.
on page 39. 54.
Yep.
Starting with number 2, that's where the word demolish was removed from this process of certificate of no effect, which is good. But it still appears that the historic preservation specialist position can screen most all types of projects and make a determination that has no effect, and therefore we would never see it. Even if we felt maybe there was an effect. So I'm not really sure why all projects don't come through this commission if we're going to function as the design review board.
Make a fair point. Would you like to speak to that, John?
That certainly, Chair, through you, Commission, we can look at that. Again, we're kind of the pre-final draft, so we're really looking for whatever input as kind of the dust has settled over the last couple of months as we've gotten the ordinance to this far along with the updated text and design guidelines. We'll certainly look at that before we bring it back.
Under the demolition and moving of building structures, it talks about if something has been deemed an imminent safety hazard, the building inspector official can approve the demolition, and then it says they'll first notify the historic preservation specialist in writing. Oh, okay. Actually, I misread that. It says they're going to notify the historic preservation specialist in writing before issuing the demolition permit. What is the notification to the commission that has occurred and the circumstances as a matter of process? I'll just draw out an example. About 10 years ago, Freeport McMoran submitted a demolition permit for the country clubhouse down at Peck's Lake with an engineering report that stated that the building was unsafe, it didn't have a foundation and all kinds of stuff. And town issued the demolition permit. And once it kind of became public knowledge, we started doing some poking around, and some people went down there and actually proved otherwise. And as a result, that building is still standing. There's a fence around it. Nothing has been done to improve it, but it does show that you can't always rely on a piece of paper that somebody submits to you.
Okay.
Going back to the last page, letter Q talks about the use of wood for doors is strongly encouraged. Steel may be used for doors and windows if painted or anodized to be compatible with the rest of the building. Going back to one of the items that was submitted for us to review and in the packet, there was a standard called material substitution. And as I recall, a material substitution required that the substituted material needed to be, I don't want to use the wrong word, but it is basically indistinguishable in texture and so forth from what was being replaced. So I'm not sure that Q really puts that forward. It seems like when we're actually given a project to analyze, there was a lot more detail in terms of the criteria. And I don't know if that criteria should be referenced in another document or should be included here. There's a lot of detail in the general plan, and I'm not sure that everything ticks and ties, or if that should be incorporated via reference.
Right.
He's writing it all down.
And then one final thing, it talked about the awnings. Awnings are permitted, the use of canvas awnings is recommended, metal awnings are not recommended, copper awnings are acceptable. And there's a photo of the canvas awning on a building that's been substantially modified way back in the fifties. That was all part of a movie set. That is not at all historic, nor is it functional. The photos that we have of awnings that were on the buildings, including the brewery building and the restaurant building, were of metal. So I'm not sure why we're not allowing metal awnings. Maybe there's some additional criteria that we should specify. You know, maybe we don't want maybe modern metal awnings, even though those have been approved already down in that business block. So.
Okay, well, I'll review that with town staff. That's a good point.
I can send you some photos of historic metal awnings that were down there. If that's helpful.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Anything else, Commissioner? Commissioner Linder?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those are all things I was looking at too. Anybody else? Comments, questions? Okay, John? I think that's it.
Chair, members
So
of the-
we do have some public comment. So we have one item from Ellen Taylor, who wasn't able to make it, but she sent us a printed letter, which Commissioner Lindner has agreed to read into the record. So we can go ahead and do that.
So this was sent to me today. Hi, Michael, I'm stuck up in Flagstaff the remainder of this week. It'd be great if you could read this letter to the HPC. Other municipalities that I know of use their CFAs to regulate visual and historic development within a specific area. They maintain control over that district without the additional and universally dreaded historical preservation ordinance. I realize that an enormous amount of time and money has been spent on getting this historical preservation ordinance, and the chances of the commission changing course at this late stage are very slim. I just want to put forth once again the options we have in keeping downtown Clarkdale historical. I have mentioned many times that there are other instruments available, less restrictive and unappealing to future developers and development in the downtown area. The HPC can determine the guidelines for keeping the downtown area historical, and the Community Development Department can enforce them during the building permit process. Rather than keep trying to tweak a one-size-fits-all ordinance, the HPC might want to consider adopting existing provisions in the general plan located on page 216 and the corresponding report that is not on the website. This takes the responsibility of enforcement off neighbors and into the hands of paid administrators in the city. It would make for a more peaceful coexistence of neighbors and a smoother, more unified application of the HPC's guidelines. Thanks, Ellen Taylor.
Okay, thank you. Next person is Drake Meinke.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Commissioners, chairpersons, and so forth. My name is Drake Menke, Clarkdale resident. I'm fully in support of a historic preservation ordinance. Historic preservation ordinance will allow us, the town, and individual homeowners and property owners to apply for grants and other things available that are out there. They might not be have to be applied through by them, but they can be passed through grants from other nonprofit agencies and others that are out there. So a pass-through grant using the HPC, bolstering that grant application could actually help fix some of the Main Street properties on town, the facade only. Okay, we've seen that done in previous studies and case studies in Thatcher, Arizona, where that was a case where they went down and they beautified the town through a grant that was provided by them through the HPC and Freeport McMoran, because that's one of their areas and so forth. So will an HPC help? Ordinance? Absolutely. It allows us to do things, allows us to do help with getting some of these structures in town updated. Now, since we've had lots of history in the town of Clarkdale, we can look at what an HPC or ordinance has. Since we haven't had one, we can see what has been done without one. And we can compare it to what we can do with one. So for 20 or 30 years, you can see what Clarkdale's look like. Maybe this is a leap forward to help us in the right direction finally. So when somebody argues about the cost of a doorway, you might want to say, hey, this is our chance to move forward. Finally, after 20 or 30 or 40 years of looking like that without this ordinance in place. So fully in favor of the ordinance to move everything forward in Clarkdale. Recently, we mentioned about the road signs up in Jerome. I think it says Jerome, Clarkdale, Cottonwood, Historic Road. You'll notice that road sign is very different from all other road signs in the state of Arizona. It's brown in color. When you follow the road signs down the hill, you notice brown and white road signs denoting historic Route 89A. When you follow those road signs, you'll pass right through 89A, right here. You'll go right over there into Old Town Cottonwood, following those road signs. However, the one road sign that was replaced in the town of Clarkdale was down at the bottom of the hill here when we did the roundabout, or that sort of a circular thing down there, or that new thing, road construction. When we replaced that sign down there about 6 or 7 years ago, that used to be historic 89A in brown and white. That sign now is white and says 89. I mentioned it to Maher years ago to replace that sign and correct it. Well, it never got corrected, of course, but that's besides the point. Historic signs are brown and white. Follow them and you'll follow the historic roadways. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. That explains that little mystery, right? Okay. Moving on to the last item of the day, the bandstand. Okay, Ruth maybe.
Oh, back up.
There we are.
All right, so I wanted to present you with an update on the gazebo / bandstand, because it's correctly called, just to communicate where we are and the conversations that we've had, what staff has been doing since our last meeting. So Charity next. Staff had a meeting with Susan Lawson, who is the state architect for SHPO, about moving forward with this project and what is the best treatment for us to consider. Typically, projects like this are done as rehabilitations. Her suggestion was to pursue this as a, not reconstruction, restoration. Thank you. Do you know how many times today I said restoration to myself? As a restoration rather than a rehab. So the nice part about the restoration is it gives us a lot more latitude when we're looking at what needs to be done to the structure and what is acceptable and maintaining this property on the National Register. So we have had, like I said, we had a very good meeting with her about that. We are moving forward under the restoration treatment rather than rehabilitation. We've also had discussions with the contractor about details. They're going to hold off until we have let them know that we're ready to proceed, because we do want to make some, we do want to go through and reassess the structure again. We also I've had several conversations with the certified building official about what is required for a structure that is open to the public, and what if any conflicts there are with proposed, what's being proposed by the contractor versus what we have to do to meet the commercial building code. It's important that we do that, because if this were a private project in a private structure, so any of the buildings along Main Street that are open to the public have to meet commercial code along with historic preservation code. And I think it is a historic preservation requirements. And it is, I think it would be unfair for the town to say, well, that applies to you, but not us. It's a much better approach when we all are following the same sets of rules. We had an onsite on the 12th with the new structural engineer, the SHPO staff, the contractor, and town staff. Bill Otwell was also in attendance. He is the historic architect that we have been using to discuss the project in detail. We invited SHPO because we wanted their input while we were discussing this with the structural engineer and the contractor to make sure that we were staying on the correct pathway. Next. So we still have a laundry list of things to do. We continue to meet with SHPO regarding the voluntary consultation. We've provided them with some documentation. They've asked for some additional information, but we continue to work closely with them to ensure they have everything they need so that they can do a proper voluntary consultation. Again, we continue to work with the contractor. He had several suggestions regarding the project and bracing and how we can maintain the structural integrity during the project. Again, he also discussed some items with the building official to make sure that we're within those.
What is CBO?
The certified building official.
Oh,
To make sure that we're staying within the commercial building code, as well as making those repairs that are historically appropriate. We're in the process of retaining a new structural engineer. They were at the site. They looked through the structure. We expect a proposal for them to do so we can work out a scope of work for a new engineering report, and that we will be bringing that report to you for review and to town council for their review. The engineer had questions about whether the plans that we have from 1999 are accurate with and match the structure that we have now. So if they are not, we are going to draft some accurate restoration.
Better, right?
It's late, I'm sorry. Restoration plans, and then move to construction phase. With this, we anticipate this is probably going to take the better part of 2 months at least for us to get through all of the next steps in this process to make sure that we have the information we need so that we can create the best plans for restoring the structure to its so that it is safe for everyone to use and to maintain it in its current configuration, which is the historical configuration of the bandstand. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Has the town reached out to the local people about having historical dimensional lumber available to use for the project that would be available?
We haven't, just because it would take so much lumber to redo a lot of that. And
Okay, I would, well, I've got at least two sources for you, so I could talk to you
That would be
later.
great. If they have, we have certainly talked to them about using materials.
Right.
One of the suggestions from the historic architect was to make sure we use cedar as often as possible because it
Right.
does not.
Right. Okay, are there, any questions for Ruth from the commission? I see none there. I see none here. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Okay. Item 6, future agenda items. Do we want to put the Broadway historic designation on a future agenda item? I see some nods, okay. So other than the usual updates, we're gonna be getting updates from the bridge. I'm guessing as things come along, and the ordinance and the bandstand would be on the next agenda item as well, correct? Bitter Creek, historic preservation, okay, so the last 3 items. Okay, anything else than those 4 items then?
I did, if we could back up to the
Sure.
bridge for just 1 second. The section 106 review, as you all know, is a fairly rigorous review and will take some time. If there are photos that any of you have of the bridge that we don't have, I think we have 2. Those would be very helpful. Any plans, any drawings, any information like that. And I fully expect the Historic Preservation Commission to play a very active role in that process. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was, the bridge was built in 1915.
We have the drawings at the museum. I'll forward those over.
Okay.
Um,
Do you have the original drawings for
But the
it?
smelter
There was-
started in 1950.
Yeah, there were temporary crossings that had washed out.
Oh, there were. And my understanding is that that bridge was washed out in about 1917 and a replacement.
That's-
Is that correct?
That's the bridge that is down there today.
Okay, but I'm remembering correctly. Okay. So, okay. I'm just wondering if we have any pictures of the original.
Have them from a distance and it's very difficult to see what it really looked like, but it wasn't necessarily a low water crossing, but it wasn't concrete structure either, so.
So people crossed Bitter Creek and probably most of the year it was
Same-
dry.
Yeah.
Well, it was the same,
Yeah.
it was the
Yeah.
same location, and there was a
Before.
structure there, it was
More
was
before.
probably a wooden crossing.
I just wanted that clarification. I didn't know if I was remembering correctly.
Okay. Commissioner Gabbard.
So the SMART grant triggers the section 106 review. So that would presumably include the plans for the siting of the new bridge as
Right.
well, and impacts to the district. Okay.
But I see absolutely no way in which we build this bridge without section 106 review.
Okay. All right, so we have 4 items for the next agenda. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:33.
Second,
Motion?
a second, yeah.
Okay, okay, Linder and Biggins. All those in favor?
I
Aye. Okay, 5-0 on that. Thank you all very much for bearing with us.